Welcome back to ABC General Hospital Spoilers channel. Today, we will learn about the issue. One of the most dramatic and emotionally charged storylines in General Hospital is unfolding before our eyes. And it's a tale of betrayal, redemption, love, and desperate measures to protect the innocent. The story we're about to explore involves Willow, a character who has endured more heartbreak than most can bear, and Drew, a man determined to right the wrongs against the woman he once loved. This is a narrative that will shake the very foundations of Port Charles and leave viewers on the edge of their seats, wondering what will happen next. The breakup before the storm. Before Willow's world came crashing down, before she found herself behind bars facing charges for a crime she didn't commit, Drew and Willow had reached a critical crossroads in their relationship. They made the painful decision to end their romantic involvement and break up. This wasn't a decision made in anger or passion, but rather a mutual acknowledgement that their relationship had reached an impasse. Whatever the reasons for their separation, the timing was tragic, because just when they thought they could move forward separately, fate would intervene in the most devastating way possible. The breakup between Drew and Willow left both of them wounded and uncertain about the future. They had shared something special, something that went beyond the typical romance seen in Port Charles. Their connection was deep, meaningful, and genuine. But sometimes, even the strongest connections aren't enough to sustain a relationship when circumstances become too difficult or when life's challenges simply become too overwhelming. They parted ways, each believing that this was the right decision for both of them, never knowing what lay ahead. The conspiracy against Willow. Shortly after their breakup, Willow became the target of a sinister conspiracy orchestrated by someone who harbored deep hatred and malice toward her. This unknown enemy decided that the best way to destroy Willow was to frame her for a serious crime. The victim of this crime was none other than Drew, the man Willow had just broken up with. Someone had shot Drew, and when the investigation began, evidence pointed directly at Willow. But this evidence was planted, carefully constructed to make Willow look guilty of a crime she never committed. The weapon used in the shooting was placed in Elizabeth's house, creating a trail of false evidence that seemed to implicate Willow. The conspiracy was elaborate and well-planned, showing that whoever orchestrated this had significant resources and intimate knowledge of both Drew and Willow's lives. The perpetrator knew exactly what they were doing, and they executed their plan with frightening precision. They wanted to destroy Willow, to lock her away and throw away the key, and they were willing to use anyone, including Drew, to accomplish their goal. When the authorities discovered the gun in Elizabeth's house, it didn't take long before Willow was arrested and charged with attempted murder or assault. The legal system, as flawed as it sometimes is, moved forward based on the evidence presented. Willow found herself in custody, facing serious criminal charges that could result in years of imprisonment. She was transported to jail, stripped of her freedom, and forced to confront the reality that her life had just been irrevocably altered by someone else's malicious actions. The truth behind prison walls. While Willow sat in her jail cell, trying to process the nightmare her life had become, she discovered something that would change everything once again. She realized that she was pregnant. This wasn't just any pregnancy. This was unexpected, shocking, and came at the absolute worst possible time. Willow was carrying a child while imprisoned, facing charges for a crime she didn't commit, with her future completely uncertain. The realization of her condition must have been overwhelming, filled with fear, anxiety, and a desperate sense of helplessness. The more pressing question for Willow was the identity of the father. She knew immediately who the father was, Drew. Despite their recent breakup, despite the fact that they had decided to go their separate ways, Drew was the father of the child growing inside her. This meant that their connection, their history together, was now intertwined with new life, with new responsibility, and with new complications. Willow had to come to terms with the fact that even though she and Drew were no longer together, they would always be connected through this child. Carrying a child while imprisoned is an incredibly difficult and dangerous situation. The physical stress on Willow's body would be immense, compounded by the mental and emotional anguish of her current circumstances. The prison environment is not conducive to a healthy pregnancy. The food might not be nutritious enough, the medical care might be inadequate, and the stress levels are extraordinarily high. Willow would be forced to endure morning sickness, fatigue, and all the other symptoms of pregnancy while confined to a cell, wearing prison clothes, and living under prison rules. The thought of bringing a child into the world under these circumstances was terrifying. The emotional reunion in prison. When Drew learned that Willow was in prison on charges related to his shooting, he was shocked and deeply concerned. He immediately made arrangements to visit her in jail. When he arrived at the prison and was finally allowed to see her, the emotions in that room must have been overwhelming. They hadn't seen each other since their breakup, and now they were being reunited under the worst possible circumstances, separated by prison barriers and the weight of unresolved feelings. During that prison visit, Willow made the decision to tell Drew about her pregnancy. She had to tell him he deserved to know that he was going to be a father. She revealed to him that she was carrying his child, that despite their breakup, life had given them a new bond, a new reason to be connected. The moment she told him must have been intensely emotional for both of them. For Drew, it meant that there was now a child to consider, a responsibility that extended far beyond his concern for Willow herself. He wasn't just fighting to free Willow anymore, he was fighting to protect an unborn child, his child. Drew's concern for Willow's well-being became even more acute when he realized she was pregnant. He understood the dangers she faced. He knew that pregnancy while in prison could lead to serious health complications for both mother and child. He knew that the stress alone could cause harm. He began to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation, not just as it related to Willow's wrongful imprisonment, but as it related to the vulnerable life developing inside her. Drew's protective instincts, his sense of responsibility, and his lingering feelings for Willow all combined into a powerful force that drove him toward action. Drew takes charge. Armed with the knowledge that Willow was pregnant with his child, Drew made a monumental decision. He would use every resource at his disposal, every ounce of influence he possessed, and every connection he had to get Willow out of prison. Drew is not an ordinary man. He has power, connections, and resources that most people can only dream of. He was determined to leverage all of these advantages to prove Willow's innocence and secure her freedom. Drew began a comprehensive investigation into who had actually committed the crime, who had shot him, and who had framed Willow. He couldn't accept that the woman he had once loved, the woman who was now carrying his unborn child, would spend her pregnancy and the early years of parenthood behind bars for a crime she didn't commit. He started gathering evidence, consulting with lawyers, and reaching out to people in positions of power who could help him uncover the truth. Drew's investigation was methodical and determined. He looked into Willow's background, Drew's own past, and tried to identify who among their acquaintances might have the motive and means to execute such an elaborate conspiracy. He considered business rivals, personal enemies, and anyone who might have had a grudge against either of them. Every lead was pursued, every clue was examined, and every possibility was considered. Drew was relentless in his pursuit of the truth, driven by love, responsibility, and an unwavering belief in Willow's innocence. The obstacles in his path. However, Drew quickly discovered that the path to Willow's freedom would not be straightforward or easy. The legal system is complex and often slow-moving, filled with procedures, protocols, and red tape. The evidence against Willow, while planted, was nonetheless compelling enough to convince a judge and potentially a jury of her guilt. Overturning a conviction or securing bail in these circumstances would require extraordinary effort and undeniable proof of her innocence. Furthermore, whoever had orchestrated this conspiracy had covered their tracks well. They had planted evidence carefully, constructed a narrative that seemed believable, and possibly even had connections within the system that would protect them from exposure. This person or these people were skilled at deception and manipulation. They had managed to implicate Willow convincingly, and they likely had contingencies in place to prevent their identity from being discovered. Drew also had to be careful about his own actions. If he pushed too hard or acted too recklessly, he could inadvertently alert the perpetrator and cause them to cover their tracks even more thoroughly. It could potentially compromise the investigation or even face legal consequences himself for interfering with a criminal case. Every move had to be calculated, every step had to be measured, and every action had to be strategic. This wasn't a situation where Drew could simply storm in and demand justice. He had to be intelligent, resourceful, and cunning. A love rekindled. Despite the circumstances that had driven them apart, despite the breakup that had seemed so final just weeks before, Drew and Willow's connection remained strong and unbroken. The visits Drew made to the prison became moments of profound intimacy and emotional connection. Separated by glass and distance, they would talk about their situation, their fears, and their hopes for the future. They would speak about the child that was growing inside Willow, the baby that would be a physical manifestation of their love and their bond. Willow saw in Drew a man who was willing to risk everything for her, who was willing to fight against impossible odds to prove her innocence and secure her freedom. She saw a man who, despite their breakup, still cared deeply for her and had stepped up to take responsibility for the life they had created together. Drew, for his part, saw in Willow a woman of extraordinary strength and character, someone who maintained her dignity and hope even while imprisoned for a crime she didn't commit. He saw the mother of his unborn child, and he was determined to give that child the chance to be born and raised in freedom and safety. This crisis, paradoxically, brought Drew and Willow closer together than they had been in some time. The breakup that had seemed to define their relationship was now overshadowed by their common cause and their renewed emotional connection. They weren't lovers in the traditional sense while Willow remained imprisoned, but they were partners in the truest meaning of the word. They were allies, supporters, and confidants in each other's fight for justice and freedom. The race against time. As Willow's pregnancy progressed, the urgency of Drew's mission became more acute. With each passing week, Willow's condition would become more pronounced, more challenging to manage in a prison environment. The baby was developing, growing stronger, and preparing to enter the world. There was no time to waste. Drew had to move quickly to find evidence of Willow's innocence and secure her release before the baby was born. Drew began to consider every possible angle and every potential lead. He looked into who had access to the gun, who knew about his schedule on the day he was shot, and who had the opportunity to place the weapon in Elizabeth's house. He cross-referenced alibis, examined financial records looking for payments that might indicate someone had hired an assassin or a framing specialist, and interviewed people who had been close to both him and Willow. The investigation was consuming, demanding, and often frustrating. There were dead ends and false leads. There were moments when Drew wondered if he would ever find the truth, if he would ever be able to prove Willow's innocence before their child was born. But he refused to give up. Every setback only strengthened his resolve. Every obstacle only made him more determined. Drew knew that he had to succeed. Failure was not an option when the life and freedom of the woman he loved and the future of his unborn child were at stake. The unfolding of truth. As Drew's investigation continued to deepen, cracks began to appear in the facade that had been constructed to frame Willow. Evidence that seemed airtight upon initial examination began to show signs of tampering. Witnesses who had provided statements began to reconsider their accounts or admit to pressure they had been under when giving their testimonies. The narrative that had been built against Willow began to crumble under scrutiny. Drew was getting closer to the truth. He could feel it. Every interview led to another interview. Every clue led to another clue. And the web of conspiracy was becoming more and more visible. Someone in Port Charles, someone with knowledge, resources, and motive had orchestrated Willow's downfall, and Drew was determined to expose them, no matter what it took. A promise for tomorrow. Through all of this turmoil, through all of the investigation and the legal battles and the prison visits, Drew and Willow maintained a vision of their future. They talked about the baby, about what they would name him or her, about the kind of parent they wanted to be, about the family they wanted to build. They made promises to each other, not necessarily romantic promises, but promises of partnership, of commitment to their child, and of unwavering support through the challenges ahead. Willow, despite her circumstances, held onto hope. She believed that Drew would find the truth, that he would prove her innocence, and that she would be freed before or soon after the birth of their child. She believed that despite their breakup, despite all of the complications and challenges, they would emerge from this crisis stronger, more committed to their child's well-being, and ready to build a new kind of relationship based on love, respect, and shared responsibility. Drew, too, held onto this vision. He believed that justice would prevail, that the truth would be revealed, and that Willow would walk free. He believed that they would have the chance to raise their child together, to give that child a life filled with love and security. He believed that out of this darkness, out of this conspiracy and injustice, would emerge something beautiful and meaningful. The impact on Port Charles. The unfolding story of Willow and Drew has sent shockwaves through Port Charles. The community is divided, with some believing in Willow's guilt and others supporting her innocence. Friends and family members of both Drew and Willow have been forced to take sides or navigate the complicated emotional terrain of remaining neutral. The conspiracy against Willow has exposed vulnerabilities in the justice system and raised questions about due process and the dangers of circumstantial evidence. Other characters in Port Charles have become involved in the investigation in various ways. Some have provided information to Drew, some have attempted to help from behind the scenes, and some have inadvertently become entangled in the web of conspiracy. The ripple effects of this single crime and the frame-up that followed have touched many lives and forced many people to reconsider their assumptions about their friends and loved ones. What lies ahead? As this storyline continues to unfold, viewers of General Hospital are on the edge of their seats, wondering what will happen next. Will Drew find the evidence needed to prove Willow's innocence? Will she be freed before the baby is born? Who is the true culprit behind this conspiracy? And what motivated them to go to such extreme lengths? What will become of Willow and Drew's relationship after she is freed? Will they reunite romantically, or will they maintain a co-parenting partnership? Next, we will learn about the chilling deception unfolding in Port Charles as Anna Devane's voice becomes the ultimate weapon in a sinister trap. Imagine the tension thickening like fog over the waterfront docks when Jack Brennan grabs his phone, his instincts firing on all cylinders the instant Anna's words hit his ear. It's not just static or urgency muddling the line. There's an eerie detachment in her delivery, a robotic edge that slices through the familiarity he's relied on for decades in the shadowy world of espionage. Chained to a rickety metal chair, in a dimly lit bunker buried deep beneath an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, Anna fights against the coarse ropes biting into her skin, her sharp mind racing while her body remains immobilized by her unseen captors. This isn't a mere kidnapping, it's a calculated hijacking of her essence, where her recorded pleas and altered audio clips are spliced together to mimic her commanding presence, drawing Jack and his elite WSB team straight into a deadly ambush. The mastermind behind this doesn't rely on brute force or flashy disguises. They exploit the nuances of sound engineering, using high-tech voice synthesis software smuggled from black market tech labs to create a phantom Anna that's eerily convincing, complete with her signature British inflection and subtle pauses that only those closest to her would notice. As Jack paces his dimly lit office, replaying the message on loop, he dismisses the faint digital artifacts as interference from a secure line, blind to how this auditory illusion is steering him toward a rigged explosion site disguised as a routine extraction point. What elevates this plot to nightmare territory is the psychological warfare at its core. Anna's voice, once a beacon of unyielding truth in the chaos of international intrigue, now serves as the bait that erodes the foundations of loyalty she's built with Jack over countless missions. From dismantling arms deals in Eastern Europe to outmaneuvering rogue agents in the Caribbean. Picture her in that suffocating chamber, the air thick with the hum of fluorescent bulbs flickering overhead, as she overhears the villains fine-tuning her voice samples on a laptop, twisting her warnings into lures that could cost lives. This violation runs deeper than physical captivity. It's an assault on her identity, forcing her to confront the horror that her own timber, home through years of interrogation rooms and undercover ops, is being repurposed to betray her allies. On the flip side, Jack's unwavering faith in Anna stems from their shared history late-night strategy sessions where her counsel pulled him from the brink of disaster, forging a bond that blinds him to the forgery now. If he acts on this false directive, mobilizing agents to converge on a false safe house booby-trapped with motion sensor explosives, the fallout could ripple through the entire WASB network, leaving key operatives exposed and operations compromised. But the danger doesn't stop at Jack. This insidious scheme has the potential to ensnare the younger generation in Port Charles, pulling in Jocelyn Jacks with a fabricated tip about her family's safety that sounds just like Anna's protective tone from past alliances. Jocelyn, already navigating her own web of romantic entanglements and college ambitions, might rush to alert Dex, only to lead him into a secondary trap involving rigged vehicles on the highway leading out of town. Even the ever-suspicious Austin Holt, with his medical expertise and street-smart instincts, could fall prey if a voicemail mimics Anna's urgency about a medical emergency tied to his family's secrets, diverting him from uncovering the real plot. And let's not overlook Sonny Corinthos, the kingpin whose radar for deceit is legendary, yet even he might second-guess his gut if Anna's voice delivers a coded warning about an impending hit on his territory, subtly altered to point him toward a decoy warehouse packed with undercover feds posing as rivals. Sonny's world, built on layers of protection rackets and hidden alliances, thrives on information supremacy. But this voice ploy could fracture that empire by sending his enforcers scattering in the wrong direction, buying the villain's precious time to execute a larger heist on the docks involving smuggled bioweapons. The genius or sheer malevolence of this storyline lies in its understated execution, a far cry from the explosive showdowns and dramatic reveals that define so much of General Hospital's drama. No need for elaborate costumes or surgical face swaps. The captors operate from the shadows of a nondescript van parked in an industrial lot, armed with portable recording devices and AI algorithms that analyze Anna's past speeches to replicate her cadence perfectly, down to the slight hesitation she has when discussing high-stakes risks. A single voicemail drops like a pebble in a pond, its ripples spreading through trusted channels. A directive to Jack about a mole in the bureau, a warning to Jocelyn about lurking threats from her exes, or an order to Austin to secure a mysterious artifact linked to his late uncle. Each recipient, bound by years of deference to Anna's judgment, becomes an unwitting pawn, advancing the villain's agenda without a shot fired. This subtlety mirrors real-world cyber espionage tactics, where audio deepfakes have duped executives into multi-million-dollar transfers. But in Port Charles, it amplifies the soap's theme of fractured trust amid glamour and grit. Jack's immediate response will be swift and decisive, rallying his team for what he believes is a legitimate op, his loyalty to Anna overriding the faint dissonance he senses after all. She's the one who once saved his life during a botched raid in Berlin, pulling him from rubble with her unerring calm. Her circle of allies, from longtime confidants like Robert Scorpio to newer players like Felicia, echoes that devotion, making them prime targets for this voice-based deception that preys on emotional ties rather than physical barriers. The trap springs not with alarms or guards, but with the comfort of recognition of familiar accent cutting through the noise, lulling everyone into complacency until it's too late. General Hospital has long excelled at identity crises, from plastic surgery swaps that turned enemies into doppelgangers to amnesia arcs that rewrote loyalties overnight. But this vocal hijacking introduces a fresh layer of terror, transforming personal authenticity into exploitable flaw. It's a colder betrayal than any resurrection or memory wipe, as it weaponizes the intangible, the sound of a friend's voice carrying lethal intent, forcing characters to question every communication in an era of instant connectivity. As Anna strains against her bonds in that concrete tomb, perhaps piecing together clues from the captor's careless chatter about a vendetta tied to her WSB past, the audience is left agonizing over her isolation. Will she find a way to embed a hidden signal in future recordings, like a reversed syllable or altered phrasing that only Jack might catch? And lurking in the background, could this be the handiwork of a resurrected Phazon variant, not the original Madman, but a cyber-savvy protege who's upgraded the family legacy with digital puppetry? Seeking revenge for old slights against the DVX, Phazon's shadow has loomed over Port Charles for years, from his obsessions with Anna to his genetic echoes in Drew and Jason. And now imagining a tech-twisted heir manipulating voices from afar adds a modern menace to the classic villainy. This plot thread doesn't just heighten suspense, it dissects the fragility of relationships in a high-trust, high-stakes environment, where one stolen syllable can unravel empires. As the days tick by in Anna's captivity, every ally who hears her voice edges closer to peril, raising the ultimate dilemma in a world of deep fakes and deceptions. How do you know who's really speaking or pulling the strings? Stay tuned. Spoilers ahead promise even more twists in this Voice of Doom saga.